major countries now looking at the possibility of having a digital currency and really asking the question.
Imagine a government that creates money that has an expiration date, and if you don't use it, it'll disappear. That's happening already with the digital yuan, and Americans are rightfully skeptical.
President Biden issued an executive order to explore the creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency, effectively converting the dollar into a centralized digital currency.
The Federal Reserve just announced that it's about to show us its new digital payment system this year in July. This is having a huge ripple effect across the entire internet because the US dollar is in the process of being replaced by a central bank digital currency, or a CBDC. In fact, most countries around the world are creating their own right now.
What if I told you 90% now of the world's central banks say they're investigating central bank digital coins?
According to a report by Citi, by 2030, there will be up to $5 trillion digital dollars circulating the global economy. But there's a problem, because most Americans don't trust the government to do this. In the 1950s, for example, the era that was called the golden age of capitalism, when we had unprecedented economic growth and higher wages, a point in history far from perfect, but in 1958, Pew Research asked the American people if they trusted the U.S. government to do what was in their best interest. And they did. That trust reached a peak of 77% by 1964. But over time, that trust has been gradually eroding, and today, that number has dropped all the way to 20. Only 1 out of 5 Americans trust the government to do this. And it's also why people like to use other forms of money like cash and even cryptocurrency. But right now, the government has their own idea for a CBDC, central bank digital currency. And this will have a huge consequence, not only on ideas like privacy, freedom, but even Bitcoin. So
Thank you, Mark. Take action with American Express Business Platinum.
in today's video, I want to help explain exactly what this is, how this might work, and how this will ultimately affect us. So with that said, let's get right into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the new Fed payment system and CBDCs. Now, the two are somewhat connected, but they're not the same, even though people are confusing them as one.
It's a whole new system that's faster and better than traditional banking. You can go to a grocery store and buy a few items with your hard-earned money, and then you present your Fed card with a trusty Federal Reserve representative. And they'll say, oh, yeah, you're too fat, fatso. You can't buy any of these things. The end.
Yeah, so that's not at all how it works. Here's how it actually works. This new payment system will make it so that businesses and people will be able to send and receive instant payments 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and that's because funds will settle between banks in real time and will only just take seconds. Here's a couple examples of how this will be used in practice. Let's say you're a coffee shop owner and you needed a quick delivery of some coffee beans. Once you got a request of payment from your supplier, you would pay through a participating bank like your credit union, and the coffee bean supplier would instantly receive your payment. On the back end of things, your credit union would send an ISO 20022, which is a digital form to the FedNow service, which would validate it and send a message to the coffee beans bank. That receiving bank would then confirm in real time that it could receive the payment, and the FedNow service would then debit and credit the money and then send a message to both banks that the settlement was completed. Now, that whole process, which sounds insanely complicated, would happen pretty much instantaneously. But the system we have right now just takes a lot more banks, time, and a lot more money. And this service will eventually apply for things like bill pay and for sending money from one account to another. This will be super helpful if, for example, you have a utility bill that's due on that same day and you want to pay it right away without paying late penalty fees. Now, eventually the Fed will want us to use it for peer-to-peer transactions so we can send money to each other in the same way that we use Venmo or Apple Pay. For now, though, this service will only be made available to people within the United States, so you won't be able to send money instantaneously overseas. Now, this will be rolled out in phases starting in July, but already in the first week of April, they're giving out formal certifications for their, quote, participants. So that is the FedNow payment system, which is tied to the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. So let me explain what that is. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. Inflation and the declining economy are extremely stressful, especially for families. In 2021, when an investment fraud was committed, the average left amount was $70,811. That's why it's so important to protect yourself online, and why I'm so excited about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura protects you and your assets by keeping an eye on your accounts, loans, home title, and investments to identify fraud and unauthorized charges. They alert you if they detect changes to your credit profile, and they help you proactively lock your credit to keep anyone from opening accounts or getting loans using your personal information. It's also a VPN service, so you can safely and privately browse the web, and they monitor the dark web for anything that might expose your emails, passwords, social security numbers, and each and every plan comes with a $1 million identity theft insurance. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a free 2-week trial using my link, and you'll be absolutely shocked just to see how much personal information Aura will uncover in just those 2 weeks alone. Go to aura.com/JIKH to start your free trial now, or you can just click the link below in the description. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this portion of the video, and now let's get back to it. Right now, we're seeing the creation of these central bank digital currencies happening all over the world. 11 countries have already launched their own digital currency, including the Bahamas with their sand dollar, Jamaica, and Nigeria. 18 countries are in the testing phase, 32 countries are developing their own right now, 39 are trying to figure it all out and researching, only 15 are inactive, and 2 are canceled. But all in all, 114 countries representing 95% of the world's GDP are in some way involved with this process, including the US. Now, the obvious question is, why is the Federal Reserve so focused on digitizing dollars if the dollar is already digital and it's already on our phone? The answer is, there's a huge difference between true digital currency and the system we have today, because our current monetary system relies more on digital claims of currency. This is why when we use banks and we transfer from one account to another, or we use apps like Zelle and Venmo and Apple Pay, we're actually sending digital IOUs and digital claims to money, but not necessarily the money itself. And that's why banks need to use third-party banks to verify transactions to make sure that the money we are sending exists there in the first place. And a true digital currency would be true value transferred from A to B without the use of a bunch of third-party banks. All of this is starting to sound kind of like the things crypto is already trying to solve, except there's a couple huge differences. CBDCs are controlled through a private network by the government, so they're not decentralized, and that gives the government full control over its supply and how quickly they can move it from point A to point B. And with that, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. Now, there's a ton of opinions on this subject, so I'm going to save mine toward the end of the video if you want to see that. But if the government creates their own CBDC, here's what that would allow them to do that's good and not so good. A central bank digital currency would give the Fed direct control over the supply of money, which is actually good, because right now they already do this with something called quantitative easing. We saw this during the pandemic when they flooded the economy with money by buying mortgage-backed securities and treasury bonds. But it can also shrink the supply of money through quantitative tightening, which is the same process but in reverse, by selling off their assets, which is what they're doing now, with the exception of this anomaly, which represents all of those failed bank bailouts. The point is this: our financial system is so complicated that it almost works like a Rube Goldberg machine, if you've ever seen those. So think of this new central bank digital currency system as financial enslavement, but with less steps. If I disappear, it was not by magic. Another benefit is speed. Because money will be programmable, it would hypothetically stabilize the value of the dollar, and it would modernize the banks. It would also make sending money and stimulus by the government much faster, and in theory lower the cost of banking, because it would force the banks to compete with the Fed to make transfers and even ATM machines much cheaper. A CBDC would also help with tax revenues, because most people wouldn't have to file their taxes. Instead, the government would know exactly how much money we've made, so they would send us an invoice and we would just have to pay. So it sounds like a lot of really great benefits, but unfortunately, there's a lot of downsides and a lot of risks.
So what the central bank digital currency is all about is surveilling Americans and controlling behavior of Americans. And how do we know? Because we've seen this happen in other parts of the world.
People are calling the concept of CBDCs as Big Brother's digital dollar. And it makes sense why people are skeptical, because CBDCs will be tied to your unique digital ID that'll be used to build your social proof. Which all sounds exactly like the next plot of a Black Mirror episode. If the government wanted, they could freeze your assets, and if they don't like what you're spending, with the flick of a switch, your bank account now shows zero.
Mr. President, the Glenflark's value just dropped to nothing.
What do you mean?
I mean, our single centralized galactic currency just went from being worth one of itself to zero of itself.
Oh, dear God, no. Calm down, people. Deploy the galactic militia and declare martial law.
Yes, sir. What should I pay them with? Their payment is the honor they'll feel to serve their... Wait, who's paying me to yell at this guy?
Give me your jacket!
Give me those...
The creation of a CBDC would give them the technological power to do exactly that. If the government wanted to encourage spending, they could airdrop some dollars in our bank accounts instantaneously, which sounds nice. But if they wanted to discourage saving, with the flick of a switch, the money could have an expiration date, which is exactly what China did to encourage spending. Now, if all of this stuff sounds like a conspiracy theory, you don't have to look at China for that to happen, because all governments can abuse power, including the US. Because on April 5th, 1933, this happened.
Hi, I'm Danielle.
Hey, I'm Antonio.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm seeing suitcases, a neck pillow. Are we taking a trip?
Yeah, I'm going to London for 3 days.
I love London.
I was hoping that maybe you can create an itinerary for me.
What are some things that you're into?
I'm in Taurus.
Okay.
Gotta have that. I love anime and I love karaoke. Maybe you can kind of figure something out.
Bing is really great here. Okay, let's have a look. There's some museums here, a few karaoke bars.
How about a person that's a fashion enthusiast, loves to dance?
Ooh. Right.
Wow, that's awesome.
And Bing can organize all of this into an itinerary.
Wow, look at that.
You definitely have a full 3 days,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a really incredible trip. Is there anything else I can help you with?
A little bit of packing?
I think I'm good there. I hope you enjoy your trip.
Half of American parents can't find licensed childcare. Businesses may even close because parents miss work to care for their kids. Wonder School can help solve that by making it easier for entrepreneurs to start in-home childcare businesses. Citi is investing in Wonder School to help offer more childcare options, which can help parents return to their jobs and help towns across America get back to work for the love of moving businesses forward, for the love of progress. Citi.
This was a decree issued by Franklin Roosevelt which gave U.S. citizens 1 month to give up their claims to gold, including coins, bullion, and certificates. Everything was confiscated and had to be returned back to the Federal Reserve. But that's not even the crazy part. The crazy part is the people that did not agree to do this faced 10 years in prison and up to $10,000 per year in fines. Now, just for context, back in 1933, that $10,000 represented over 3 times what the average person made in a single year. So that would be like if today the government told us to turn in all our cash or risk being fined over $180,000 per year. Now, you might be thinking the government would never repeat the same mistake from 1933. And you might be right, but you don't have to look very far in history to look for clues on abuse of power. Between 2010 and 2012, the IRS prioritized conservatives and eventually apologized for unfairly targeting them for tax evasion. This naturally happens when power has an agenda and the technological ability to actually enforce it. So the question we have to ask ourselves is it worth the risk? So here's my personal opinion. Let me just channel my inner Warren Buffett for just a second, because even though it's 2023, it's starting to feel a lot more like 1984. You know what I mean? No, you wouldn't, because it's just like me, a really old reference. So I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything, because I don't know if I fully understand this stuff myself, because it is so complicated, but from my point of view, I don't think this is a fight against cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin. I don't think the government cares. Nor do I think this is a fight against consumers, and I don't think consumers care. When was the last time you got a Venmo payment from a friend and thought, this better settle now? Said no one ever. If anything, this is about commerce on a global scale. This is the way for the Federal Reserve to combine what the government is good at, which is trust in its currency system, something it had a lot more of in the past, and combining it with the innovation from the private banking sector. Because hopefully by combining the two, they can create an innovative financial product that allows the U.S. to stay ahead on the global stage. The byproduct of which happens to be full control. but it's also not a tool that the government needed to add to its toolbox. It's got plenty of those. But still, regardless of how much people oppose the idea of CBDCs, I think they're inevitable. As countries around the world launch their own, the US won't want to be left behind. Even the World Economic Forum have told us that if the central banks don't innovate, they'll be left behind and lose the idea of money and trust and, quote, control. So it makes sense why they have to innovate. But does that mean you should sell your dollars and buy some Bitcoin? Probably not. I don't think it's going to be that bad. But I still am just a little bit as a hedge. And that's just me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to grab your free stocks, links are down below, and then go track them automatically with the spreadsheet linked down below in my Patreon. Love you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you back here on Monday, Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. See you soon. Bye-bye.